when we left the Soviet Union and we first landed in Austria. It was a very early morning on February 15th, 1980, basically a year before the events of the show were taking place.
At the beginning, Elizabeth Jennings is like, Henry would be okay. Paige wouldn't.
He steals the caviar and he's got it in his pocket all day long. You are going to get food poisoning. Please put that in the fridge.
In the context of ICE, I really saw Beeman differently as a character.
So everything that you've done in the Marine Corps was all about killing the enemy. And General Madison, he said, be polite, be professional, but have a plan to kill everybody that you meet.
We can talk about Annalise here in a second. What a hot mess.
Crazy ex-girlfriend.
Crazy.
I thought he was going to kill her at the end of the episode.
I did too.
Russia, I indicated, is a geopolitical foe.
You know, the Cold War's been over for 20 years.
Make sure I don't do any spying around here.
Oh, you better not.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000.
The 1980s are now calling to ask for their foreign policy back.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 2 of The Illegals, the Americans Rewatch Podcast. I am Michelle Kinney. You are here with the Mayday Network with Julie Roginsky, Lieutenant Colonel Jaclyn Urso, retired, Craig Miller, and Jeff Jarvis. So this week, we want to talk a little bit more just about the episode itself, because when we did the pilot last week, I think we talked a lot about the political, context, the historical context, and I think the episode kind of did the same with the characters. It laid everything out that we needed to know, so that by episode 2, we could just get right into it. So this episode is called The Clock, and guys, whoever wants to jump in first, I would just love to know just your first thoughts. Like, well, how did you feel after you watched it?
Well, I think the show is obviously all about children, right? Like, it kind of reminded me of The Sopranos, which is about the family and then the family. In the same way, this was kind of about the business, but also the business of family. And so I thought that was interesting. What I was kind of laughing about was that I don't remember whether real life people show up in the show, but Caspar Weinberger's wife had a pretty interesting role in this.
Well, it all worked out. Thanks to you and Mr. Weinberg. Oh, it's all right now.
And I think those of us who remember Iran-Contra, which is when Caspar Weinberger had to step down in 1988, was it, Jeff? 80, I guess that's what it was, right?
I got to Google it.
Yeah. I didn't know much about Mrs. Weinberger in real life, but she seems like a very nice woman if you listen to, if you watch the show. So I thought that was kind of interesting that they had somebody play her as this very nice person who was very nice to her staff and kind of considered them to be family and helped out her maid's son, who apparently had been going through an illness before. All of that I thought was interesting. I also think it's interesting. I don't know if folks caught 60 Minutes, but there was a 60 Minutes has been following this issue that's been going on for a very long time about how Havana syndrome. I don't know if people sort of remember the Havana syndrome.
Yes.
And they did another show about Havana syndrome and how actually, lo and behold, it is the Russians, and the Russians do it through some sort of radio frequency that is
like a microwave thing.
Like a microwave that's very small, and they can carry it. And of course, watching that, I thought, oh my God, this is literally like something out of the Americans. And so is it art imitating life? Is it life imitating art? Is it both? I thought that was interesting.
One thing that struck me in watching it again was seeing Beeman post-Kristi Noem. Right? The show, as we talked about last episode, the show makes us sympathetic with the Russians, no matter that they kill people and they do horrible things and all this. We end up finding ourselves rooting for them. And Beeman, I think last time was presented as a bit of a bumbler. And this time, the way he treated the the shopkeeper and stealing the caviar and trying to test the neighbors with the caviar, I think. But he was a real jerk and an asshole. And so in the context of ICE, I really saw Beeman differently as a character. I don't know if everybody else changed their views of him because of the times.
Yeah, my views weren't changed, but I think kind of what you were saying is that I think they were making the FBI unlikable again, right? Because he's like doing something that he shouldn't be doing, and it, puts the Russians in a better light and is making the American team look bad and that they're violating the laws. That's how I took it when I watched it. And Michelle, you kind of referenced at the beginning how the characters were realized in the beginning, but I thought in episode 2, they started to show the softer side of Kerry Russell's character, right?
Yeah.
And so, I think I took the note that said, going back to last week's conversation about how those Russian spies were sent back to Russia and they hugged on the runway. Her character at the beginning, Elizabeth Jennings, is like, Henry would be okay. Paige wouldn't.
Henry would adjust if he had to. If something happened to us, he'd find his way. But Paige, I worry about her.
And it completely tied back to that whole story of the narrative we talked about last week about she's thinking about if they get sent back or if they have.
Well, was that going back or was that if she was dead?
Oh, I
think either.
Yeah, or either. Because in the beginning she talked about it, and then she did carry the gun herself, right? But I thought she was talking in the beginning because it was the first 2 minutes about how Henry would be okay, but Paige wouldn't. So
yeah.
I think they were showing the softer side of her, which we normally didn't get in episode 1, and I don't want to think about forward episodes, obviously, even though I've seen them. But
I think we see her more as a mother, right? Yeah. Especially as she's trying to bond with Paige. Yeah. And Paige is 13. And I mean, I remember being a 13-year-old girl and just the most awkward, horrible time of your life. Talking about shopping for bras. I was like, oh God. And there's a moment towards the end where she wakes her up and is like, do you want to get your ears pierced?
You know how we said you could pierce your ears when you were 15? Do you want to do it now?
I thought that was such an interesting thing to choose to want to bond with her about. And
but don't you think that was kind of almost a losing your virginity kind of thing where little drop, that's how I took it, little drop
the blood.
Not to be gross, but I thought it was almost like she was kind of piercing her innocence to some extent. That's how I thought that was kind of an allegory for that potentially.
I do like that because she did say something earlier, you're going to be older soon. So I think she was thinking about her maturing into a woman, and that is a good point because that prick of blood, kind of.
It was very, and then she stuck her finger in it, it was,
it was mortality. Yeah. Jaclyn, I'm curious whether you would imagine at that time that the U.S. government was sophisticated enough to have swept the Secretary of Defense's den before meetings. Would they have discovered that bug? How credible was that as a plot line? The bug in the clock is the point, folks. If you haven't watched yet.
I feel like there should have been some type of sweeping. And if you're having that high of a meeting with cabinet secretaries, there should be some type of meeting in the House. I was talking to Michelle going, is the FBI, were they that competent? I mean, it looked like Beeman knew what he was doing, So it kind of brought me back some nostalgia going, well, maybe our government agencies do know what they're doing and we're just kind of in an anomaly right now. I would think in that time, knowing that it was the Cold War, knowing that there were spies in the area, in the network, I would hope that we would be sophisticated enough to have some type of sweeping systems, because I know that there are now, and we're aware of things like that.
Well, and it made me almost nostalgic for the Cold War. And I mean, I wasn't around for so much of it, but here are these two countries in a cold conflict for decades. And you're right, Jeff. That's all I kept thinking about through the whole episode, rewatching this. Not so much maybe last week, because I think I was really focused on trying to get other stuff, but this episode in particular, when they're in the van and we meet Nina for the first time, or Beeman's, confronting her. And it's really, really weird watching this in a Hegseth and Trump and Kristi Noem world, because...
And Marco Rubio.
because first of all, the Secretary of Defense, right? The maid is in the office wanting to steal the clock or sweep the clock. And I was like, first of all, there's a Secretary of Defense, not a stupid Department of War. And run by, I guess we can assume, competent people. And even so, Elizabeth Jennings is talking to Philip in their bedroom, I think, and she's like, he's insane, talking about Ronald Reagan.
You hear Reagan ranting and raving. I mean, he's crazy.
Like, he's an insane person. And in the last episode, when Elizabeth meets with her handler, he says, the Americans have elected a madman. And all I kept thinking about was like,
you don't know. You ain't seen nothing yet.
You ain't seen nothing. You ain't seen nothing. And also, I just want to say too, the caviar stuff. So they set it up. We're meeting Nina for the first time. Nina works in the embassy. She is, I don't know, like selling caviar to some, so she could make money.
She's trading the caviar for stereos to send back as people's theory.
Okay, right. Yeah. Which is breaking a whole bunch of Soviet like communist laws. But all I kept thinking was Stan Beeman. So he's holding on to the caviar. He steals the caviar and he's got it in his pocket all day long. I was like, you are going to get food poisoning. Please put that in the fridge.
That's so funny that was your analysis. So that's by the way, totally true. But I had a different reaction, which is that they set it up beautifully. Because I had forgotten the caviar narrative, the storyline from when I watched it, 10, whenever it was the first time. And I remember watching the first part of it where Beeman says to him, "You ever had caviar?" And he's like, no, never had it or whatever.
Yeah. I tried it once at a tourism convention. I didn't like it much.
You're kind of supposed to think as a viewer, like, you're Russian, of course you've had it. And I'm thinking, as a Russian from the Soviet era, no, he actually never has had it because it was so hard to get. It was so absolutely impossible to get. And meanwhile, what ends up happening is that they absolutely set it up properly, which is, of course, in reality, they couldn't get it. It's not.
Was Beeman trying to trap him?
I think so.
You think so?
That's how I read it. I don't know, because
he's hard to read. He's really hard to read.
Yeah.
And just like knowing the actor too, like I looked up, his training as an actor, and he studied under the Meisner method, which is basically, as an actor, you're reacting to the other person in the scene with you more than you're internalizing anything. And so I'm always like watching that on his face, and I'm like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
I don't really know what's happening, because has he let that go? Especially because they're talking in bed as they're going to sleep, Elizabeth and Philip, and she's like, do you think, like, that's one hell of a hunch that he had? And he's like, no. If you saw the look on his face when he closed the trunk, with his flashlight, he thought he was, crazy for even considering it.
Right.
But there is like this discomfort in that scene between Philip and Stan.
Yeah.
There's like a tension.
You can see the wheels turning in Philip's head.
I took his caviar.
Julie, I'm sorry I interrupted you because I'm really interested. The credibility, of the caviar and their reaction to it.
Well, at first, it doesn't seem credible at all, because at first, my reaction was, of course, this is ridiculous. Where they're trying to pretend, Philip is trying to say, "Oh no, I've never had it," and the viewer is supposed to be like, "Oh yeah, you've never had it, buddy, right? You're Russian." But the reality is, like, no. I mean, if you ask my parents, they never had beluga caviar. It was just the best caviar that normal people could get was the little red roe, but not beluga, not the black stuff. The black stuff is just, I mean, that was like liquid gold. I mean, you did not get that. And it wasn't that we were all so poor. Like everybody, nobody in the Soviet Union was poor or not poor. You either were in the inner circle or in the Kremlin, or you weren't. And if you weren't, which is 99.999% of the people, you just didn't have access to beluga caviar. They had little stores, just so people know, called Biroska, which were these stores for foreigners where you could only buy stuff with hard currency, which of course it was illegal to possess if you were a Soviet citizen. That's where the beluga would be sold. but not so, Americans traveling to the Soviet Union probably could get it if it was even available, but certainly not normal Russians. So the interesting part of that whole narrative was like, of course they have this. And to me, it was so fascinating that they take a bite and they're like, holy shit, this stuff is so good.
Right.
They come to the United States as Soviets to actually have a Soviet product. I mean, talk about just the whole narrative arc of this whole thing going back from the pilot, where they where Philip says, like, what are we doing? Like, it's so much better here than back there. And she slaps him. But at that point, when she takes a bite of the beluga, she almost begins to kind of realize to me, wait a second, there's
so
something
good.
really messed up here, that you can have it. You could have a product that nobody in the Soviet Union could get, even though it's a Soviet product.
Yeah.
Right.
But you have to come to the United States to have it.
And it was almost like you saw the capitalist sort of wheels turning also, because she's like, how much was this? And he kind of makes a face like, I can't talk about it.
What did this cost?
And we know that Stan had told him it's like $500 an ounce or something. So he knows, but he wanted to like give this to her and present it.
He liked it better than he did.
Yes. And she's like, we were like you. We didn't have money.
We were like you. We had no money.
We were poor, or like whatever. I don't know exactly what the line was.
That's exactly what she said. That's not actually.
Yeah. So that's not accurate.
Interesting though, Michelle, because they said they're not, and they did it at the end of last week, right? She said her real name, but they're not supposed to talk about their past too. And she's like giving another glimpse, like, we weren't rich either. And so like, I think that's interesting that she kind of had that tell during that moment. But as someone who loves caviar, a bougie person, I didn't think about it being in a all day. I think they put it on tortilla chips at first. And I was like, no, not a tortilla.
Or like a cracker or something.
Little crackers.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But I was like, a potato chip maybe. But
yeah.
I hate caviar, by the way. I am one of these caviar.
I had some yesterday. It's delightful.
When I was a kid, sorry, this is an offshoot. When I was a kid, there was a restaurant in New York called Cattleman's, and we'd go there as suburbanites coming into New York City, like Jaclyn's visiting New York now. We do a touristy thing, and they had I was known in the family as the adventurous meter, and so they had a caviar omelet on the menu, which I ordered, which could not have been more disgusting. Swimming in a black pool. And I didn't get very far in it. Caviar is something best taken in very small doses.
Well, and maybe it's like, remember as a kid, you'd have Brussels sprouts and your parents boiled them and you're like, that's nasty. But as an adult, you had real good ones and you're like, okay. As a kid.
They're still nasty. My theory is they're grown only by 3 Mile Island. They're radioactive cabbages.
Well, then I'm going to be pretty radioactive, I guess. But, well, Julie, I actually, Jeff had a good point, then they talked to Nina, right? Because I think I wrote the note down that they both kind of had a win, the US and Russia. They bugged the office, but then they're potentially starting to flip Nina. Is going to that stereo store and sending things back to the Soviet Union, was that portrayed correctly? Like she would have been sent to a labor camp, or like, is that egregious? Like where she would have agreed immediately?
Yeah, because she's compromised, or I mean, I don't know. I never worked in intelligence for either side, but I would think that, because you are open to blackmail then, right? If you're doing something without telling your embassy, then effectively you're now really, really opening yourself up to being blackmailed, as she was, right?
Yeah. And you're not supposed to make money, right? Like you're not supposed to be.
I think this would, by the way, this would be the case. I think if the United States had somebody working in Moscow even today that was doing something that they didn't know their embassy about, you just don't do that.
But the store owner was not just an average store owner. The store owner was immediately hostile to the FBI and to the U.S.
Can we talk about that for a second? Because first of all, this guy sounds American. We don't know if he is or if he's an illegal or like what the situation is. And I say illegals as part of the illegals program, if anyone's tuning in and doesn't know this yet. The illegals program that Elizabeth and Philip are a part of. Who is that hostile with FBI agents coming into your business? I was like, this guy has got a lot of balls.
Yeah.
Pushing around these two. And I let the Stan's joke about like, He's like one of 3 minorities in the whole FBI. He can't be fired, so don't even try.
He's one of 3 minorities we have at our headquarters. They can't fire him. I mean, he can pretty much do anything.
But do we think this guy was illegally fencing beluga? Like, he doesn't seem like the kind of guy that's sitting there eating beluga all day long.
Right.
Like, what's the whole point, that he was like accepting stolen goods, and that's why he was so hostile? That's how I took it. I don't know, Jaclyn, what you think about that.
Yeah, I could. Jaclyn, what do you think?
I think when he walked into the store, the guy immediately took the caviar and put it underneath.
Mm-hmm.
So it made it look like there might be some like random cash in there. And I think both the FBI agents were surprised when they opened it up and it was caviar, and they just kind of played it off.
Oh, could have been microfilm, Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. And he sticks his like little dirty pinky finger into it. I was like, no, stop.
Well, that's now contaminated, really overheated.
Yes.
Now you're also obsessed about that.
Yeah, it's just totally
because like I think
you put that in your mouth.
Right. And I was like, I think I've bought caviar like one time in my whole life. I bought it at Zabar's and I brought it home for Christmas to my parents. And it was like, an expensive, like nice thing I wanted us to have. And I remember I was so freaked out that it was going to spoil. I had it on like 4 different ice packs and then more ice. And it was like in the car, on the floor, like away from the cat. Like I was so terrified that it was going to go bad. So just to see him be like, I'm going to stick that in my pocket. I was like, stop it. You're going to die. You're going to die.
I think the guy at the stereo store was just a pawn in this whole cog. I don't think he really had anything to do. He wasn't really in charge. He was just told, hey, this is going to happen. And, you take this and you give it to me, probably by one of his bosses. So he was just doing what he was told, and he didn't want to screw it up. And I guess maybe he just had a little chip on his shoulder and was antagonistic with the FBI, because Stan does walk in there and like flashes the badge like, hey, look, I'm the FBI. Like, I can do whatever I want. And he's like, who are you to just come into my store? So I think he knew that there was something going on, the stereo guy, but he didn't really. He was just a worker bee in the whole scheme of things.
While we're on capitalism, I can't remember because I watched it yesterday, so I've got a short-term memory here. What was it that he bought at the end that was expensive?
It was caviar.
It was the caviar. I thought he bought something else. No. Okay. I thought there was kind of an interesting capitalistic thing here.
Yeah,
right. It's the Russian angle, but it's also the luxury angle. It's also
Yeah, it was a caviar.
Yeah.
Caviar. Okay.
Yeah, because she asks like, how expensive was this? And he kind of goes, like kind of smirks about it.
If he had said that it came from Stan Beeman, do you think she would have freaked?
Well,
she being more suspicious?
Did it come from Stan Beeman? I think.
Or did it? Yeah. Was that the end of it? Was that, or did he go buy it? I wasn't sure. I thought maybe it was the rest of the Stan Beeman.
Yeah,
we don't know, because you're right. Like, Stan didn't leave it. I thought about that too for a second. I was like, Stan left that there after he said he didn't like it.
I thought he'd gone out and bought it.
Yeah, me too.
But then again, like, where would he be buying that? Where would he be buying that?
What?
Bloomingdale's.
Like beluga cat, you can just buy it around.
Yeah,
Bloomingdale's used to have it in the day.
But I think that's what Julie's point was. It's amazing the fact that like regular Russians, where this product is made, can't even get it, but then like you can pick it up in the store in Virginia or DC, and like maybe Elizabeth is like, damn, maybe we can get better life here. Like, there was something maybe that clicked in her head. Especially thinking too, if he said $500 an ounce, this was 1981.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know the currency exchange then, but probably twice.
How many ounces is that?
I don't know.
It's pretty big.
3?
Pretty
3
big.
or 4?
Yeah.
I mean, I think about my cat's can of food is like 5. I think it's 5 ounces. Is
and it ain't caviar.
Yeah, no, it does not. It is
tasty feast, right?
Yeah. Halo spot stew pate.
It kind of reminds me, not to go down memory lane a little bit, but when we first when we left the Soviet Union and we first landed in Austria, it was a very early morning on February 15th, 1980. So right around when this was basically a year before the events of the show were taking place. And it was a very cold, as you can imagine, winter dawn day. We left Moscow right before dawn, and we landed in Vienna right as dawn was basically had broken. But it was I remember that day very well. It was just one of those winter days where the dawn really never breaks. And we were picked up and taken to the hotel where we were staying in Vienna, and they gave us breakfast. And they gave us those little Yoplait yogurts, or whatever the Viennese equivalent is. And my parents put that in their mouth, and it was the equivalent of the Jennings eating this beluga caviar. They could not believe something like this existed on Earth. They were like, and I thought it was disgusting then, and I think it's disgusting now. That was wasted on me. But they had that same reaction. So I was watching this, and I was thinking, I could totally relate to this, because it was the same time period.
Yeah.
And the same kind of reaction that they had, the Jennings had, the Elizabeth and Philip had, that my parents had, which was like, oh my God, what is this incredible
Well,
thing?
Julie, I remember you telling me once about seeing someone with like a stick of gum when you were in Moscow.
Yeah.
Like, can you just talk about that for a minute? 'Cause I think that's super interesting.
It must have been 1979 or so, 78, 79. My father and I were in Red Square, and there were these American tourists, of which there were very few, and they were wearing jeans, which is the first thing I noticed, because that was just not something you'd ever see. And they obviously saw this cute little 5-6-year-old and took out a piece of gum and gave it to me. And my father, we didn't speak English, they didn't speak Russian, but kind of made it clear, like, can she have this piece of gum? My father said, yes, of course. And they gave me this gum, and I was like, I don't know what to do with this. And my father said, I think put it in your mouth. But I remember putting it in my mouth and chewing it and being like, same reaction, like the beluga caviar, being like, oh my God.
Yeah.
What is this incredible thing that's in my, think about that, a piece of gum, right? But I'm not going down memory lane here to go down memory lane about me.
No, it's fascinating.
It's relevant to the show in the sense that even after all these years that the Jennings, Elizabeth and Philip were living in the United States, I think at this point they were there for probably 15 years, we're led to believe, right? 10 to 15 years. That there are still things that they're discovering that they never had access to, like beluga caviar, which was from the Caspian Sea. Beluga, I think, is from the Caspian, if I'm not wrong. But it's
Julie, were there other things as time went on in the West? Were there other things that tasted deliciously Western to you?
I mean, everything. I mean, just walking into a supermarket for the first time and seeing the fruit and the vegetables. Just think about I to this day never take it for granted. Every time I go into, Morton Williams.
Bananas.
Or, not even bananas, but how we have these fruit, when you go to the fruit aisle, there's just
it's beautiful.
Piles and piles and piles of oranges and things like that. I mean, it's been 45 years, friends, and I still don't take it for granted.
Yeah. Wow.
I think, and which is why I think I can kind of relate to their attitude about them not taking the stuff for granted, right? Even after 10 or 15 years of living there. So, if, it's been over 45 years for me, then think about that.
I got to ask, how about McDonald's?
Yes. I put that in the trailer. I don't know if you guys noticed that. I put McDonald's in the trailer a couple times.
I have a sad McDonald's story. The sad McDonald's story is that, the sad McDonald's story, it's not sad, but it's kind of makes me a little sad.
Poignant.
It's poignant. It's poignant. That's a very good way to describe it. One of the first things we did was go to McDonald's, and I got a little hamburger and I got a little small fries. And I thought the fries were unbelievable. And I saw that there was a large fries that you could have. The red one, right? Was the white one was the little one, and the red one was the big one. Neither my parents nor I knew how to describe that we wanted the large one. And so for about months, I don't know how long it was, I really wanted the large fries. But I could not make it clear to anybody behind the counter that that's what I was asking for. So I eventually got my large fries, but it took a while.
Wow.
But McDonald's was just amazing. I remember going to McDonald's in Parkchester in the Bronx, where we were living all the time, and getting my little burger and fries and Carvel ice cream, something else, which I recently found out that Fudgy the Whale and Cookie Puss are the same cake.
They are. Yeah. Which is also a very 80s thing.
Took me 45 years to discover that too.
Jaclyn, that probably means nothing to you not being a New Yorker.
I grew up in New York.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay.
Well,
So you know.
she grew up on Long Island.
Yeah, I'm just here visiting.
That's the heart of Fudgy the Whale Land. Yes.
Yes. Carvel ice cream was a big family tradition, and Joe loved to make mint chocolate chip.
Right. The rest of the country and the rest of the world, Carvel, I think, is just like a Long Island phenomenon. I think
we had it upstate. No,
it was in New Jersey.
I grew up in Atlanta. There was one in Atlanta, and my parents who grew up in New York City would, on like birthdays, like that was the cake they would go get. They would get an ice cream cake from Carvel because that was something that they grew up with.
I remember the song. Do you guys remember the song?
Yes,
Carvel ice cream.
Make fresh ice cream.
Well, see, like these things are so deeply American and like part of our identities and our memories of being kids or just being an American. And that is the thing I think that is so, I feel like we take for granted. I take it for granted. How wonderful life has been in this country at large.
Until now.
Until recently. I think that's what makes me so sad. Amongst many, many other things. But it makes me sad because listen to Julie talk about what it was like to experience very American things for the first time and like how life-changing core, she was shooketh by the fries. And when Elizabeth is laying in bed and she's talking about, Paige is delicate somehow, she goes, but Henry would be okay because he's like you. He's like Philip. That's what she says to him.
He's the bright side. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Julie I'm so glad we have a Russian expert and lived experience here on this. Is fascinating. I'm eager. So we finally meet a very important character in the Russian embassy, two of them. What do you think of them? How was their Russian?
The Russian was fine. Well, Nina's Russian is excellent.
She's Russian. She's Russian, right? Yeah. She's also like stunning, like beautiful.
Yes, I will say what I found, as opposed to Nina's Russian and the Russian of the person that she's speaking to, who's the other aide that she's asking, like, what's going on in there? She's like, I think that a big breakthrough. That Russian was written by real Russians. I found that the Russian that the two, was it the ambassador and the head KGB guy? The two top guys, right?
Yeah.
Were speaking. That was written in a very kind of formal, stilted, like that's not how real Russians speak. Russian's a very, very colloquial language. So it was kind of written to be very stilted, I guess maybe that's not the right word, but the Russian itself is fine. It's just, it's
stiff.
It's not how real people speak. Whereas Nina was speaking Russian the way that normal.
Yeah. Not to keep asking you because Julie, you're the only one that has experience.
I know today, so yeah.
As I'm reading it, they always say the person's name like at the beginning of the sentence, even though when we're translating it, it's like the name is at the end of the sentence.
And the patronym they say out loud, but they don't put it in the subtitle.
You picked up on that. Wow, Jeff, that's great.
Wait, I didn't.
Whenever you address somebody in Russian formally, so Vladimir Putin, right? Nobody would ever address him as Mr. Putin or back then Comrade Putin or anything else, right?
Yeah.
The name is always your first name, and his name it's Vladimir, right? And it's your father's name, which is your patronymic, and that's your formal name. So if you were talking to him, you call him Vladimir Vladimirovich because his father was Vladimir and he's Vladimir. So it's Vladimir Vladimirovich.
Wow.
And Michelle, like, what's your dad's name?
Michael.
Yeah, so you'd be like Michelle Mikhailovna, which is the Russian. That's the female gender version. So you wouldn't be Miss Kinney if somebody were speaking to you formally ever.
Okay.
So it's always So when they address each other formally, that's how at work you would address somebody that way. But it's interesting they picked up on that, Jeff. But it's Nina's Russian is great. My Russian.
Oh yeah, you've talked about this to me. It's like
so. Listen, you guys, it's like Austin Powers. Like remember when Dr. Evil goes up in the Bob's Big Boy Or Austin Power goes up in the Bob's Big Boy, and then he comes back into the 90s. Like they shoot him up into space in the 60s, and 30 years later he comes back and he's like, "Hey, groovy chicks," and everybody's like, "Where's he been the last 30 years?" That's my Russian. My Russian is 70s Russian. So that when I went back to Russia the last time, which was in the 90s, which is a really long 98, was a really long time ago. Even back then, because it already had been 20 years, people were looking at me like, she sounds like she's from here. And her accent's like she's from here, but yet she's speaking like she's been stuck in the Bob's Big Boy for the last 20 years. It's totally 70s slang Russian that has nothing to do with the way people speak now. And
wow.
But the way they spoke in the 80s for sure, because that was 1981. It wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
I'm not the person to ask about that. You probably have to get somebody who's been there a lot more recently than I have to tell you.
Yeah, that's not going to be you probably ever again.
Not going to be me while this regime's around, that's for sure.
No.
I say, Michelle, I had an interesting comment too.
Yeah.
About, she said, we're not going to be able to go out and do the things at night with Stan Beeman living across the street, right? So I kind of want to tie it back to that because they have to do so much of their work at night or sneaking around, obviously. And we, in the trailer, you talk about, yes, we're going to talk about the wigs and how they get dressed up, which I think is crazy too, right? Because they always look impeccable. And I'm like, where are they doing all of this? First of all, in their garage before they go out. But now that Stan lives across the street, it's going to be a lot harder for them to kind of go under the, shadow of darkness, because if you see cars leaving the garage at 2 travel agents doing that.
When you see Philip going to, we can talk about Annalise here in a second. What a hot mess.
Crazy ex-girlfriend.
Crazy.
I thought he was going to kill her at the end of the episode.
I did too. I forgot about
crazy. And so
I'm tired of this. I'm going to tell somebody. What if I call the police?
Please don't threaten me.
We'll make little babies and it will be the beginning of our life together starting tonight.
I actually don't remember what happens to her, so I can speak on this. But yeah, I thought he was going to have to kill her, and maybe he still does. I'm not sure, but because I think she's going to go off the wagon. So.
Well, she's very clearly unhinged and lonely, and is desperate for someone to pay attention to her, and so she's doing things to get his attention that are outside what is acceptable, and even though she thinks that he is not who he is. And and I guess my point is that when he was walking up to her room, he was putting the colored lenses in, which I was like, did they have those in the 80s? I was like, I guess they did.
Oh my God, they were so bad. They were bright blue.
I mean, he looks creepy.
Yeah.
He looks so creepy. Yeah. And the other thing too, and I should find this, and maybe we can find somebody to talk to us about this. But there was a woman who worked for the CIA who was kind of in charge of the disguises and how they had to create these realistic disguises for people to have and be able to put them on within 10 seconds and completely change your identity. And so I'm sure that if we had that, I'm sure they had something that was similar. Yeah. But there's so many. I mean, how many did we see? Okay, we saw Philip in the first episode as Clark. But we also saw him as the guy who goes and stabs the pedophile, who's in the plumber's outfit or whatever. Elizabeth's the blonde in the beginning. But then, they're just, and okay, let's get back to the clock here for a second, because all right, so we see they've been given some impossible task, right? And they're super pissed off about it. And they're like, they're coming to the realization that all of this is ramping up in a way that they have not had to experience yet, because of Reagan and because of what, the Soviets are telling them to do. And they have to go do this impossible task, find this maid, get her to, because Annalise takes this little booby camera and takes a bunch of pictures of the office, so they know that it's in there. They go and find her son at his college or whatever, and Elizabeth is sitting there on a park bench, looking like a Quaker or something, and in her little disguise. And she walks up to him, and she's got a long ass golf umbrella looking thing that has a blade on the end, and she's pretends to trip and stabs the son, which has poison on it.
That's a real story. That happened in Bulgaria.
I'm sorry.
But but that occurred. The cases of this happening in Bulgaria and Germany too, and England. Did they occur after the show was on or before the show was on?
Bulgaria, I think, happened in the 70s.
Okay.
I think I'm pulling this way out of the recesses of my mind. I think the guy's name was Makarov. He was a Bulgarian agent with an umbrella.
I mean, that is, but it's crazy. And also, I don't know about you guys, but I remember the first time watching this, I was like really deep into it, I think. And I started to have fears, irrational fears that this was going to happen to me. And I would, if I saw anybody kind of like walking with a long thing, I would like kind of stay away from them. I'm like, I don't want them to stab me with their.
Watch out, Michelle.
It was 1978, the poison umbrella. Sorry, that's what it was. 1978, the poison umbrella assassination of Bulgarian dissident Georgy Markov in London.
So it was very timely.
It was very timely. He was attacked on Waterloo Bridge, so interesting. But I have to say, the part about this show that I find incredibly unrealistic, in addition to where are they stashing all their different disguises and wigs, is like, I have a 13-year-old. If my husband and I were like, yep, well, we'll be seeing you. It's 10 o'clock at night.
Right. We got to go out.
We got to go out. And by the way, we're going to both stay out, or at least one of us is going to stay out all night. Like, they're travel agents. They're not pretending to be pilots.
Right.
But okay. Now I'll speak as a baby boomer.
Okay.
When I grew up, I'm not saying I think my parents would leave us alone. My sister was 5 years older. Also, we would go to, they would go to a dinner party because that's what they had in the suburbs at the time. And my sister and I would sleep in the back of the station wagon outside on the street while they're inside having daiquiris. Frozen daiquiris were a thing. And so, and we didn't have scheduled play dates.
Right.
And we, why don't you just go out in the street and play? And we did.
I think that at least, I think the five of us even, I mean, generationally come from different times, but Craig and I and Jaclyn, like we're the last kids that grew up like that. My parents didn't have me waiting in a station wagon while they were in maybe getting daiquiris, but like if my parents were going out with their friends, or they would go to their friend's house and like have like a party or something, my mom and dad would just bring me and stick me in one of the bedrooms with like crayons and like my tape recorder, and I'd like do dances and make up dances and color in my coloring book, and I would just keep myself occupied. And when your parent picked you up, they picked you up from your friend's house, and there was no phones, you played out in the street, and that's just how it was. So maybe it's just, different time. Maybe these kids just weren't as curious about like what the hell was going on in that garage, because there was a lot of things happening in that garage and it was very, very loud. And I'm always just surprised in that tiny little house that they're not hearing anything.
Well, I was thinking that same thing when, the mom of the kid who got poisoned invites or doesn't invite her brother over, right? But he comes anyway to attack Philip. That is a loud fight. And I don't know, because they say it's like Anacostia, which isn't a great neighborhood, especially back in the day, right? Like our neighbors just used to hearing things like that. But then also he breaks that guy's arm and he's not like writhing in pain. I'm like, I feel like there should have been more of that, but I'm just.
Yeah.
But they're supposed to have been in Anacostia. That's the neighborhood where they're supposed to be.
I think that
I didn't catch that. I didn't catch that.
On the bottom of the screen is
did it? Okay.
Anacostia was a really bad neighborhood.
Oh, well, I went to college in DC, and like even this was in 2000, and you wouldn't go to that neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's why they had the maid living in that neighborhood, because maybe she probably didn't make a lot of money.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you meant
No. The maid's house was there. So that's why I was saying, because it was not a great neighborhood where they used to hearing people fighting or doing. So maybe that was it, but it did pause a little bit because that was a loud fight scene, and then they broke his arm, and he was just like laying there screaming. Like,
so I didn't know about this. It's a Jaclyn, you said you knew what it was. It was like a jiu-jitsu move that he does.
It's a martial arts move called an arm bar, and there's a few different types, but in this one you put your legs one behind the head, one in front of the head, you lock your heels together, and then you use your femur as the leverage point, and you pull, and so you break the guy's arm by using your femur as the point where you crank on it. So what had gotten me in watching this episode is, they're trained for the mission. And every once in a while you see their humanity pop out. And I think Philip has got a lot more humanity in what's going on than Elizabeth does. But I think sometimes Philip wears and tears on Elizabeth, and then all of a sudden you see her humanity kind of come out. Like when she finally put the shot in the kid's butt, she kind of like had this sigh of relief. And I don't know if it was a sigh of relief like, oh, thank goodness, like I didn't kill him, or was it, oh, thank goodness he didn't die, so now I don't have to deal with a dead body. But one way or another, I felt like there was a little bit of humanity there. But you see a lot more humanity with Philip throughout really the entire episode. And this happened in the first episode as well, where he's like struggling with reality and, like the mission is getting to him emotionally, and he's connecting it with, his children. And then towards the end of the episode, you always see Elizabeth then turning with having some humanity. And then Philip is the one talking her back into, let's continue on with the mission again. It's like this yin and yang,
Yeah.
It was really, really weird to me.
There's a line, I forget what it was, but Philip says to her something about the mission. Oh God, what was it? It's something about like
important,
Yeah, and he goes, is it worth it going around and fighting for no reason?
This is our job.
What is? Throwing our lives away for nothing?
And like he basically made the argument that like we're doing this for nothing.
Right. And then at the end, he's the one that flips, and because she's the one then questioning the mission and the risk involved. And he was the one saying, yeah, but we did it. Now we're in the Secretary of Defense's house.
Yeah.
And it's like, every time towards the end, it's the yin and yang is now switched up again. And I felt connected with that, with my mission as a Marine from the beginning, when I went to officer candidate school, and then I went to, the basic school, and then every training on, in every conversation we had, every opportunity we had to go get deployed, to, run old plans, everything was focused on killing the enemy. And, you're going to the target range, you're firing your rifle, you're firing, your pistol, and the targets are all human silhouettes. And it's all to kind of immunize you from the personal piece of killing somebody. Like you're constantly in this fight to kill people. And it's like everything you do and everything you say is, we're killing the enemy, we're killing them, and we're doing hand-to-hand combat. And this is the way you kill people. This is the way you break their arms. This is, you have to take apart a weapon, you have to put it back together again. You've got to, do a test on it to make sure that you can tell them, the max effective range of this weapon system before you go out there and then you shoot it. And then the demonstration happens and you see, the magnitude of this, weapon system, and then you get to go and shoot it yourself. So everything that we've done in the Marine Corps was all about, killing the enemy. And Mattis, which is kind of like St. Mattis, we have, General Mattis is the guy for our generation. He said, be polite, be professional, but have a plan to kill everybody that you meet. And so, when I saw their humanity come out, it's like, it kind of gets to you after a while. And I'm still having a little bit of trouble kind of transitioning back into normal society, recognizing that maybe I shouldn't be so vigilant all the time.
Hearing you talk makes me think for the first time, I hadn't seen their attitude as an allegory for Americans in Vietnam. And breaking the fourth wall. We're recording this before it's airing on the internet, but the day we're recording this, Country Joe McDonald died, and famous for being at Woodstock, getting the entire crowd to chant. And it's 1, 2, 3. What are we fighting for? Don't ask me. I don't give a damn. Next stop is, and I would say now, Tehran. And that. What are we doing this for? What are they making us do?
Yeah, for what?
We're pawns. I hadn't thought of this before, but America having come out of Vietnam the decade before.
Yeah.
Russia went into Afghanistan when?
We went in 2001, about a month after September 11th.
When did Russia go in?
Oh, Russia went in
79. Right. So in both cases, both nations were sending people as meatballs into the fire, and we're not sure what we're doing and why we're doing it. And so I hadn't thought of this until this moment after hearing you talk, Jaclyn. I think that we can see in them ourselves and our own reaction to what was happening and what's happening now.
Yeah, when I went to Afghanistan and when I went into Iraq, it was I joined the Marine Corps to serve my country in freedom and democracy, and I had such a free, liberating feeling, thinking that I was doing the right thing, and then I'm going out, and my people that I know are getting killed and getting blown up, and I've clicked it off safe a few times, thinking that I was going to get I was going to die and we were going to get into a firefight, and like don't know what's going to happen the next day, and am I going to make it home alive, and why was I just the lucky one that didn't get blown up? And then you go back and you study it afterwards 10 years later, and you realize we were working on, when we went into Iraq, we were working on a UN Security Council resolution from 1992. It was a 12-year-old resolution, working on intelligence from 12 years ago, saying that it was weapons of mass destruction. Why? Because we couldn't get a UN Security Council resolution in 2004. Right? Because they weren't believing us with the intelligence that we had. So we had a coalition of the willing, and we manipulated the rule of law and said that, well, they violated the UN Security Council resolution that ceased hostilities in Kuwait, because now they won't let us back in with the weapons of mass destruction, UN, the UN weapons inspectors. So now they violated that UNSCR that ceased the hostilities. So now we can go back in to Iraq because they have weapons of mass destruction. And it's like 10 years later down the road, now I'm learning all of this and like doing the studies. But at the time I'm thinking, well, I'm doing this because my country needs me. I'm doing this because this is the mission. It must be important because they're sending me out there. If I'm going to die, I'm going to die in for freedom. And I was just like watching what was going on. And they were, the two of them, Philip and Elizabeth, were convincing themselves of the same things that I was convincing myself of. And my friends were convincing ourselves of, right? Yep. I want to go to Iraq. I want to go to Afghanistan. Why? Because it's important.
Well, and she says as much, right? Elizabeth, when they get the order, he's like, this is insane.
Risky. This is insane. We need 6 months for this at least.
Think how important this must be for them to ask this.
Elizabeth, this is crazy.
And she's like, no, but she goes, well, it must be important if this is the order, if they're telling us to do this, it must be really, really important. I wonder what it is that they're going after. I wonder what it is that they need. And like, she recognizes that. And he's just like, what? Like, this is a crazy thing to do that should take 6 months to plan, to make sure that we do it right. And I think that that's at the end too, where Elizabeth says, I always want to see the humanity in her, but then she says things like, she's like, that tingle that you get right before things get real, before something's going to go bad. And she said, I had that. And I think that the relief is that they got it done and she could get out the door. Yeah.
And she didn't have a dead body on her hands that she had to get rid of.
Right.
Or she had humanity. I agree with all of you that was a moment.
It could be both
for us to guess. So at the end, the Soviets got what out of this? Did they learn something that was so important, or
you said something nuclear? Yeah. They were going to make a golden dome kind of over.
SDI.
So the guess is they didn't know that before.
Fully supports your efforts to build a ballistic missile shield, provided it covers Europe as well as the United States.
Yeah, I mean, right. I guess according to the show, they didn't know that Reagan was planning on putting SDI in.
Yeah.
Right.
Didn't they say something about like, I remember hearing Margaret Thatcher or like somebody else was going to be there.
Thatcher и министр обороны НОТ прибывает завтра. У нас есть сведения, то что НОТ и Weinberger встречаются один на один у него дома.
Even the wife, I forget everybody's name. The wife had told the maid, like, we're having some unexpected guests, make sure you clean out the drawers upstairs, blah, 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 blah. And so they were going to be expecting, there was going to be a meeting that they knew about that was going to be happening.
If it was happening there, it was a secret meeting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jaclyn, don't you have these meetings in the skiff? Like, are you really ever going to talk about SDI in your den in the living room? Like,
you have the skiff and you've got codes to get in there. You've got to have like double security clearances. Just because you have a secret clearance doesn't mean you have a clearance to go into the skiff. Yeah, it was kind of flabbergasted. And I'm like, they're not that stupid that they wouldn't be having those conversations in broad daylight.
Well, Jaclyn, now all you need is a black curtain in a country club. That's a gift now.
Right.
All right, I want to talk
or
sex.
A signal chat. Wait, who?
Can we talk sex for a minute?
Okay.
The show begins again with something that is rather eye-popping.
Yeah.
I didn't remember the show I'm not being prudish at all, but this was non-pay cable.
Yes, it's FX. Yeah.
FX.
Yeah, it was FX. So
Spicy.
did it cause any raised eyebrows at the time it was on?
I don't think so, because remember, Mad Men had just ended, and that was pretty racy, and that was also FX. So I don't recall it having.
And Nip Tuck, I think, was before it too, right? Which was pretty.
Yes, Nip Tuck was, which I never watched, but that was pretty racy too. I think.
And where was Breaking Bad? Breaking Bad was what?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think, well, it's interesting too, because, and not to spoil it, but I think there is a lot more sex in the first couple seasons, and then Felicity, or not Felicity, God, Kerry Russell, I think, didn't want to do it as much, but sex is a big weapon. And she even talks about it, right? Because she was like, I didn't know that woman looked like that woman.
Yeah, she's like, I didn't know she looked like that.
Yeah.
You never said she looked like that.
Yeah, I did.
Not like that.
Finish it like that. But I'm like, it's so ironic because she's banging someone in the first episode, right? So it's like, it showed her a little bit of jealous humanity there too.
Well, and the same with Philip, the last episode. He's listening to that sex recording and you can see him get tense, but then the second that she turns and says to the guy, the FBI guy that she's having sex with, it's like, next time it would be just so much better if you could be stronger. And he starts to smirk because he realizes, oh, she's got him now and she's going to get the intel that she needs, So I just thought that was, I noticed that too, Craig.
Well, I had a couple of thoughts about that. One is, when I watched that opening scene, I thought it was actually Kerry Russell with her blonde wig again.
Me too.
I did too.
Yes. I think that's what the whole point is, right? You're supposed to think it's the two of them having sex, and then you realize, oh no, they're not. The second thing I thought about, we never talked about this in the pilot episode, but when he's listening to her having sex, my reaction was not just that he was not liking that this woman who obviously is in love with is having sex with somebody else, but it's also whether he's questioning whether when she's having sex with him, whether she's faking it too.
Yeah.
The way she's faking it with this, and he's kind of thinking about what she's doing here. And to me, kind of thinking is she pulling the same bullshit stunt with me?
What's real?
What's real, right?
This person, right? Ever. Yeah.
So with her strength greater than his, her loyalty to the cause greater than his, the sex scenes and the jealousies, what's the feminist analysis of the Americans thus far?
I think it's the whole Madame Defarge thing from Tale of Two Cities, where the women at the guillotine were the ones baying for blood more than the men. That's the whole thing about the French Revolution. It's all the women who were knitting at the guillotine during the French Revolution who were the ones who were the most, active revolutionaries. And so I don't necessarily have a feminist view of it or not view of it, other than they obviously have a very strong partnership. It's not like he's the inferior and he's the superior or vice versa.
There's the only thing I think is sometimes I think she could be in more danger in these situations where she's having sex with bigger men and stuff, but she is so strong. And I'm in the beginning, in the pilot, right, when they've got the guy in the back seat, the guy who flipped, who had raped her back in Russia. And he's running his mouth, and she's like, shut up. And she kicks him.
Listen to me. We cannot sit down.
Shut up. Every single time I see that, I'm like, yes. It was like watching Wonder Woman, the movie, the first time, being like, holy shit, here's all these women who are badasses and they're kicking ass and they don't need anyone to save them. And she doesn't need anyone to save them, to save her rather. But when Philip steps in, though, to defend her, she's all of a sudden like, whoa, I've never had that happen to me before. That's a different feeling.
I will say she is the least parental. She's the lesser parental person there. And I'm not talking about I get that mothers and daughters sometimes have difficult relationships, but I'm talking about even with Henry, who's really cute, by the way. What a sweet little boy. And yet, it's his dad and he who have that kind of friendship, and he's the one telling him to brush his teeth, and he's the one sitting over Henry's bed at the end, looking at him in the dark, kind of worrying that he's never going to see his son again. Whereas she's very fatalistic about it. She's like, I have.
They survive.
Like she's like, I'm not going to sit here. I'm just gonna put a bullet in my head.
Yeah, she's not gonna. You're right. She's like, I'm not going to temper anything that I'm doing, my expectations or my feelings about any of this. Like, I can only just think about what will happen to them when it happens. I'm not going to be more careful, and I'm not going to pull back or anything because I'm afraid of my kids being by themselves, or I'm afraid of my kids having to survive on their own. And the thing is too, so she has this instant, right, where she's talking about the bras with Paige, and then the ear thing with the blood, which is like, just, I don't know, a little weird. But Philip tells Henry, brush your teeth. He goes, and he's like, but I did, I swear I did. He goes, if I go back there and your toothbrush is dry, and he's like, what are you going to do? And he looks at him, and the next thing you see is the two of them are outside playing hockey. Like, it's just, I'm like, oh, he's like, oh, he's the fun dad.
Yeah, but it's also, I thought it was like going back to the pilot episode, and I think you see this through line here, which is that he's the one that says, let's just bail on all of this, not because he wants to like live life as this westernized, consumerist, but because he wants to make sure the kids are going to be okay. Like, he obviously has these kids. He has these kids who he loves, and he wants to be their dad. Whereas to her, the kids are secondary to the mission, because if the kids weren't secondary to the mission, she'd be a totally different mom. She'd be out of there. She would do exactly what Philip wants to do, which is, why don't we just get the hell out of here and raise our little family somewhere far away from everybody? But that's not her priority. So if anything, she's almost the opposite of what you consider to be somebody who's maternal. I mean, that's not what normal moms. Normal, everybody's a different kind of mom. That's not your warm, fuzzy mom who always puts her kids first.
Yeah.
He's into playing the role, and she's into the mission.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she's, I think, ashamed that her children are so, what she says, soft. They're Americanized. And I think that she wanted to pierce the ear for the bonding experience, but she was all proud of Paige after, when the blood was shedding and Paige didn't flinch and cry. She had that, she touched the blood like, yeah, my daughter maybe is a little bit tougher than I thought. And like, now I'm proud of her.
It's such a good point, because she said she's delicate somehow. She's delicate somehow. But then when she does that, she's like, oh, maybe she's not.
Which, to foreshadow the rest of the series, I won't give any spoilers away, but it'll be interesting how Paige's and Henry's strengths now, how they're perceived now versus how they're perceived later. So just keep an eye on that.
Yeah. And looking forward to the next episode as we wrap this up. So in this episode, we have Caviar, Stan, which brings them to Nina. Nina is a new character. We have, we're learning more about the dynamic between Elizabeth and Philip, and how the stakes are getting higher and higher and higher for what they're doing.
We're inside
we're inside the Secretary of Defense.
We're inside the Soviet embassy, which I think is critical. You start to see what their anonymous colleagues are like.
Yep. Any other takeaways here? What am I missing?
I think that there's still questions between Stan and Philip. I think the two of them are still testing each other out, and I think that whole caviar scene was a test. So I don't think Stan's over it all.
Over the car.
Yeah.
So Jaclyn, it's not just that Stan thinks Philip is a suspicious, weird character. It's that he could be an illegal.
I think he's sniffing it out. I think there's just hair on the back of Stan's neck that's standing up right now. He doesn't really know what's going on, but he does it. But it seems not. It doesn't seem 100% put together for him.
And he was undercover for 3 years, remember, before coming to Virginia, right? So he was undercover in the KKK. So I think he has that spidey sense of something isn't right here.
Something doesn't feel right.
Figure it out.
Yeah, my bank robbery assignment the last 3 years, undercover.
Undercover with who?
A white supremacist group out of southern Arkansas.
And I'm going crazy, because even his wife in episode 1 is like making fun of him, like, oh yeah, everything is crazy. Everyone's a spy. Everyone's this, right? Like, we're in boring suburbs now, babe. Like, let's get together. But he has that something that he knows.
Yeah.
But I think too that if you're in the writer's room for the series, they want to get that going, that tension going. But that'd be like having Sam and Diane Stupp in the second episode of Cheers, right? You can't do that. You got to keep the tension going a very long time.
Well, and that's the other thing too, is like, And I'd be curious, I mean, if maybe the creatives have talked about this, like in the writer's room, was there a decision made? Was there a decision made between the director and the actors? Or did the actors individually make a choice as actors to have a backstory or have an inner dialogue or something? Like, so what is it? You know what I mean? Like, where's the origin?
We should get them on the show and find out, which we will. Before this is all said and done, we're going to find a way to do it.
We
Just
must.
go to Central Park. Stan's there with his kids a lot. I've seen him.
I know.
He is? Oh, I didn't know
His
that.
grandkids. I've seen him, a couple times there. But.
Yeah.
Well, then we're going to have to go stalk Stan in Central Park. Sorry.
Yeah. And tell him to please refrigerate his caviar. We don't want that.
I'm going to bring caviar on next week and enjoy it while we speak.
You should. You should.
Wait. One more question for our Russian expert.
Yes.
As you got over here, was there any food you missed from your Soviet heritage?
I missed everything. I was raised by my grandparents when I lived there, so I missed them tremendously. They were refuseniks. They were not allowed to leave at the same time that we left because my grandfather had worked on the first Sputnik, so he was not allowed to leave because he ostensibly knew military secrets.
Wow.
So, and they were my whole life. So it wasn't so much food that I missed them.
Yeah.
It was being sort of, ripped out from the people who were my caregivers. So. Not particularly, because, my parents could certainly make, there's really nothing. Listen, there was not much food to miss there. This was the Soviet Union at the height of, I shouldn't say the height of the Cold War, but the waning days of the regime when things
collapsed.
Hadn't collapsed yet, but before things opened up, which they did about, I would say, 6, 7, 8 years later. But it was the dreary 70s, so it wasn't particularly that. I miss my family. That's what I
all right, thank you.
Yeah. I wondered, well, because my husband and I go to the Russian samovar pretty often, and we've been going. Actually, I think we started going when we started watching The Americans.
Oh, not from Sex and the City. That's when it became famous.
No, we started going when we started watching The Americans. Russian Tea Room is on my list, though. I haven't been there.
It's not Russian.
I don't want to be the kid in class that keeps the conversation going because the bell rang. But you made a good point, Jeff. I was just thinking about it too, because the woman whose son gets poisoned, she's so into her son, right? And I think that juxtaposition of, like you were saying, with Elizabeth not being so maternal, and she says to him, "What about God? Don't you think about God?" And I think that's so US to bring religion into it, especially in the 80s. And it just proved that weird juxtaposition too of look how much this woman loves her child. And she would do anything for him, even though she falters at first, she panics, but she ends up doing it. And would Elizabeth do that for her children? I don't know.
Yeah. Would any of us?
Yeah.
But she decides, but she at first decides not to. She at first decides to be loyal to the country over.
Right. But I just thought it was an interesting juxtaposition too of
no, that's really smart.
And it's just a different angle of her motherhood versus.
Yeah.
That's her sense of religion and morals. Yes.
Yeah. She's like,
I want to look forward into the next couple episodes if they bring it.
Yeah. She's like, I don't need it. My Lord protects me. And then they go back to Elizabeth and Philip in their bedroom, and he's pacing, being like, God, what were they thinking with this woman? All of these religious people are just terrible targets.
He said God will help us. It's not good. People who believe in God always make the worst targets.
Because they don't think, they don't think sensibly, and
you just wait, Henry Higgins.
Right. Exactly.
But it's funny that she said it that way. The last thing I'll say is because my mom, we grew up Catholic, and my mom told me this story about this guy who's, there's a flood coming to his house and a boat comes to get him. And he's like, no, God's going to save me. And he keeps going higher and higher in his house, and he ends up drowning, and he gets to heaven. And he's like, why didn't you save me? And he's like, I did. I sent 7 boats for you and you didn't take it. These people that just keep saying, oh God, it's God's power. And do it. And I'm like, what? They're giving you the option. God's option was put that clock in there and your son will live. If that's what you live, right? So I just want to see how that plays out for the rest of the series.
Yeah, for sure. Well, everyone, this has been a delightful conversation. We miss Olga and Nina this week, but that's the great thing about having so many people involved. There's 7 of us. So when we have busy schedules, so far, when we have busy schedules and things going on, there will always be a handful of us here. And that's the great thing about this. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to Julie, Jaclyn, Craig, and Jeff for being part of this fantastic conversation today. If you're listening at home or watching at home, please like and subscribe. Click down here on the YouTubes, like and subscribe to the Mayday Network. Please follow us and be a part of this journey through this 6-season television show that we're going to make our way through.
Forever.
Be here forever. But if you want to find us, just take a listen on your way to Central Park to go find Stan Beeman, and you just want something to listen to, you can find us on Apple Podcasts. We are under the Mayday Network, and all of our shows are on there for you to listen to. So without further ado, I will say goodbye, and we will see you all next week for episode 3.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
You are listening to the Mayday Network.